How's it going, everyone? This is Keanu Yamamoto with Coachers Podcast, sitting here with my man Kyoshi Harris, head coach for Garden City.
Yes,
Coach,
sir.
tell us a little bit about yourself, man, kind of your progression, family, background, all that good stuff.
Man, first thing, I appreciate you having me on, man. Not a problem. My name's Kyoshi Harris. I'm a head football coach here at Garden City Community College. My progression for coaching has been a little bit different probably than most, especially with a lot of the younger guys coming up. I spent most of my career in junior college. Excuse me, I'm going on like my 21st year, I believe, coaching junior college football, heading into like my 27th year of coaching. Like most people, when you just get done playing, you miss the game, so you go into coaching, and so I got into coaching and teaching, and then from there, wanted a little bit of a challenge. So I coached high school football for about 6 years, and then I wanted a little bit of a challenge. I was a head high school coach for a year, had an opportunity to coach junior college football in California. California is huge for junior college football at the time. There were 74 junior colleges in California that played football. So if you weren't coaching at the USC, the SCs, the San Diego States in Southern California, or maybe the Division III level or conference in Southern California, you were coaching junior college football if you wanted to be a college coach, just because there's so much opportunity and everything. And then just like everybody else, you have hopes and dreams. And I wanted to be a head coach at the college level. So in 2017, fast forward, I went out to Independence Community College. I got out my comfort zone and left California, left a lot of money on the table, and people looked at me like I was crazy, but that's part of the profession. And I went out there, and I took a job with, of course, Coach Brown at Independence Community College. I love just being able to coach the athletes that I always wanted to coach. I love being on the road. I love coaching football full time. So that was special to me. So long story short, I resigned from my job in California because it was just a temporary job going out in 2017. I was only supposed to go out there and coach one season for him. He needed an offensive line coach, and so I went out there. I coached one season. I resigned from my job. My wife looked at me like I was crazy. We moved out to Independence, Kansas. Probably a year and a half later, I was the head coach at Independence Community College, had some good success. From there, it led me to, meeting Keanu, going to Boise State. I miss being the head coach. I just miss being around guys. I miss junior college ball. I miss the grind. And so I took a job at Garden City Community College. So here I am.
That's awesome. I'm going to put you on the spot because we always debated this
Yeah.
just in the GA room because obviously I worked with Coin and Coin played for you at Independence.
Yes.
But we always debated this, and feel free to answer this or not answer this. What is stronger, in your opinion, Cali JUCOs or Kansas JUCOs?
Man, here's what I tell
Or
everybody.
you can just say plead the fifth.
No, I'm not going to. Nobody wants to hear to plead the fifth. And so there, Kansas JUCO is a great conference, probably one of the best conferences in the country. There's a lot of, what I'm saying, pluses to coaching in Kansas. Besides the scholarships, you get to recruit nationwide, the dorms, cafeteria and so on. But that's not taking anything away from California. California has good junior college football. Man, a lot of those teams can play in the Jayhawk and compete in the Jayhawk. It's different, back in the early 2000s when scholarships were limited for out of state kids in Kansas and the Mississippis and the Texases and the Iowas. Everybody was flocking to California. California had some of the best junior college football in the country. I've coached guys that were just couldn't play for me at Garden City right now, couldn't play for me at Independence when I was in California. But then when they changed the scholarship out of state limit in the different areas in the different states. And then in 2017, Kansas went to unlimited. And so that kind of hurt California a little bit as far as pulling some of that talent out. But California is such a big hub, and everybody recruits out of it. There's a ton of talent, man. It's my home state. It's very comparable, but there's a little bit of difference. The difference is basically I have an option if I wanted to go recruit California or go recruit Louisiana, where most of them don't have that option just because it's hard and so on. So,
Yeah,
but
we're we're talking about recruiting. We're on the topic right now. What is kind of your footprint then? You can recruit national. So what is kind of your guys' footprint there at Garden City?
man, normally, I'm gonna be honest, we stick to mainly the Midwest and the South. Of course, Kansas is our backyard. We recruit Kansas heavily, and that's something that Garden City didn't do in the past. But that's important to us and everything. Majority of our kids, I'm not gonna lie, come from like Alabama, Louisiana, Florida. We're getting more kids from Texas now. We hit Detroit heavily. We have some hubs, some primaries too at the same time. Of course, Georgia and the South Carolinas, just like everybody else, is part of that hub. But we're not going to turn down a kid from Colorado or Nebraska. We pulled a old lineman out of Colorado this year. We pulled a D tackle out of Nebraska this year. So anywhere we can find a good player, we're going to go. I took 3 kids out of California this year, and everybody was like, "Man, I thought we didn't recruit California. If they're pretty dang good players, so I'm gonna go after them. Just like anybody else in the country would. So if it takes us going to Western Samoa or Australia or even Canada or anything like that, and there's a good player, man, we're gonna go after him.
Shoot, man, you were just on an Alaskan cruise, and I just saw that. Thank you. Come say hi. Do you remember Coach Kyoshi? I have a
Hey,
good picture of you guys.
beautiful.
I got a little morning coffee.
That's it, sweetie. How you doing? You doing
Oh,
good?
that's right. She can't hear you. I got the headphones on. He said, "How you doing?"
Okay, gotcha.
Say hi. Say
See you
bye.
later.
Give honey. Give honey.
Bye bye, sweetie. Very good,
Thanks, Haley. All right, so you were just out in Alaska,
man.
and I just saw that Boise State has a commitment from Alaska.
Yeah.
I mean, have you ever recruited Alaska before?
I've recruited a couple of dudes from Alaska before, believe it or not. When I was in California, and I recruited, a couple guys from Alaska, and then you come across, Alaska has some talent, especially with the Polynesian culture out there. I wasn't there long enough. I probably need to go to spend a couple of days there. Just drop me off
That's
somewhere.
that's a perfect excuse just to get some fishing in.
No doubt, no doubt.
Just so everyone knows, his wife caught a fish on the cruise. Kiyoshi did not catch a fish.
I got skunked, man, in Alaska. It's my dream to go, man. But she caught. She was like my first fish ever, and then the guide, just stuck it and killed it, and then she had, first she had to get over holding it. She didn't even want to hold it, and then he stuck it and killed it and gutted it, and then he cooked it up right then and there, and man, it was good too. And everybody it was another family that was with us right then and there, and everybody was just taking part in it and eating. It was a good time. First fish ever.
That's awesome. Was it salmon, halibut? What was
No,
it?
it was a big old trout.
Okay,
Yeah, big old trout. So,
good for her. You've been doing this for a long time, doing this at a lot of levels. I mean, what is the why?
man, I think the why behind it, I think, we all kind of get addicted to basically the grind, man. We get addicted to the sport. We get addicted to the preparation. You know what I'm saying? We get addicted to just being around the guys. When you do it for so long, it's just like, man, I'll be honest. I tell people all the time, I sat out. I thought it was like right when I left Boise State, I was home for a year. And, most people are like, okay, enjoy your time, put your feet up. I was watching football from 9 a.m. I had 2 screens up in my living room. I would watch on West Coast football all the way till 11 o'clock at night. I was good for about 2 or 3 weeks. And then after that, I'm just like, man, I miss this. I miss the grind. And most people are like, well, you miss working 17, 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. Yeah, I missed it. I mean, you miss being on the road. You miss, just being working up, waking up early. But main thing, I think I just missed the competition. You know what I'm saying? The competition of trying to develop something and get it better, and just the competing and so on like that. And that's what intrigued me about Garden. I knew I was going to have to come in and just get my boots on and roll my sleeves up and work, and what I'm saying? And that's what I thrived on, and that's what I like right then and there. And so it was good, and so I'm still enjoying it. So having a good time.
That's awesome. Can you kind of talk about, just kind of the evolution of your coaching philosophy from starting off, as a young coach, coaching JC ball in California to now as a head coach at Garden City out in Kansas?
Yeah, when you're younger and so on, everything is about just trying to win, and you don't kind of see the whole big picture. You just want to win, 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 win. And over the years, especially coaching junior college ball, my philosophy changed over the years, and it was more towards just the helping, what I'm saying, the mentoring and so on like that. I coached a lot of great players when I first started off, coaching community college in California. And then a lot of kids just kind of fell off. They didn't get that opportunity like to continue for whatever reason. They were talented enough to go on and play at the 4-year level. They just didn't go on to play at the 4-year level. They chose to go work, or they didn't like school, or maybe got into a little bit of a trouble, or or went and had a baby, or this and that, whatever reason it has. They didn't get an opportunity to kind of, I put it like this: everybody has 4 years to play on the field. You know what I'm saying? Or has an opportunity to play on the field at 4 years. Well, you ain't gonna see too many people at the age of 27 or 30 going back and playing college football, you know what I'm saying, from the jump street. So there's a prime time that these guys, when they leave high school until, you know what I'm saying, their hamstrings just tighten up like how mine feel, you know what I'm saying, where they just can't play anymore. So I think my philosophy changed over a period of time after seeing these kids, you know what I'm saying, not being able to have an opportunity to go on and play and, just talk to the kids about this when they grow up. Because, I tell players all the time, man, you're going to grow up. Because I have kids come in and, you'll be surprised, and they'll come in like, this is not for me. I don't want to do this, whatever, for whatever reason. There's always some kind of excuse, you know what I'm saying? And they're talented. I've had kids that are in the top two starting lineups, you know what I'm saying? Just for whatever reason, just, I don't want to do this anymore. And all the conversation leads back to, man, in 20 years or 30 years, when you're my age, man, and you're going to be sitting there, are you going to have any kind of regrets and so on? So I think kind of my philosophy changed over the time. I wanted to give these kids options. I wanted to help these kids out. You know what I'm saying? I wanted the kids to have an opportunity to go on and get a college degree. You know what I'm saying? They all have families. They're going to have families, and get opportunity to better your families. And to do that, hopefully it's through education and so on. And so realistically, I just seen guys like play 2 years at junior college in California and basically go to work or go raise a family when they could have went on and played. You know what I'm saying? I've seen guys just come on out, even when I was in Kansas, and just kind of, give it up and so on. So I wanted to take on that mentorship to kind of help these kids, will move on and tell them, say, hey, man, football ain't for everybody, but you have a pretty good option here if you want to use it. I don't want you to have any kind of regrets in life. You have to make your own decision, but what I'm saying, you got the opportunity, you got the talent, the athletic ability, the mindset to play this game. So I kind of like help move them on a little bit, but more rather, the winning's going to come if you recruit good players. You know what I'm saying? If you establish a great culture, a winning culture, but a culture of just holding kids accountable and all. And we'll probably talk about that later. So my philosophy has moved forward as far as just more helping kids out. That's why I came back junior college. I had other opportunities, once I left Boise State. But I tell people all the time, I wanted to be in junior college. That's where I've been most of my career. And it's not about the oohs and the ahs and, the polos and, all that stuff to me. It's about, I get satisfied. And, when I see kids sign a scholarship, man, that brings me gratification.
That's a great answer, Yosh. That's a great answer. We kind of talked about it, or you kind of just touched on it a little bit, about players coming in, having 2 years, or you're only going to get 4 years really playing football. How do you establish buy-in, right, with maximum 2, maybe 3 years if you gray shirt a player? And a lot of times, some of these kids are coming in to get to the next level. How do you establish buy-in?
What's crazy? Our average kid is only here with us about 2 full-time semesters
Damn.
nowadays. So
Wow.
it's a little bit different than, last year. I mean, years previous, not last year, years previous. You know what I'm saying? When I first started coaching, most times when I first started coaching junior college football, it was basically your kids were there with you for about 2 years. They had to get an associate's degree, graduate. These kids nowadays, we have a variety of kids. I'm just throwing this out here because most people think junior college is just, hey, kids that didn't get academics right or kids that got in trouble. Nah, the climate, the teen population has changed, over the last 5 to 7 years. You're getting more and more kids that fall underneath the radar when it comes to recruiting. You get more and more kids that are qualifying. You get more and more kids that want to transfer back. Realistically, to answer your question, we're having these kids here for 2 full-time semesters, which is a short period of time. So you have to immediately establish a culture. And I think our culture is a winning culture, but I also think it's, we kind of build a family atmosphere, a family environment. I have a great staff, man. One of the best staffs is in the country because they put up with myself. We grind, we work, we're around our kids the whole time. I have myself and 10 assistants, and I think that's part of it. We're around our kids so much. It's like we kind of adapt that family environment, you know what I'm saying? And, there is, the letdown, and then I think they don't want to let you down at the same time, but they're also, what I'm saying, is they're recognizing that we're trying to help them get to the next level, that we care. It's not always about winning. I tell them all the time, I said, man, yeah, I'm going to win some, I'm going to lose some. I said realistically, but I'm probably going to win more than I'm going to lose. I'm going to be honest with you, but I don't get my satisfaction or my gratification from winning football games anymore. Man, you believe it or not, it's kind of, man, that's what happens. I just turned 50. I've been doing this a long time. It's just like I get more excited when a kid gets an offer than when that kid is not supposed to get that offer. And so that's what we kind of foster. That's what we kind of build over at Garden City, and we have, and over the years at every place that we've been. And it's just like, hey man, it's in a family environment, but we want the best for you. You know what I'm saying? You did it this way, okay, for so long. Now let me help you do it this way. And once they realize and try, we slowly start to take them bricks down off that wall, that barrier that they kind of built up because they've lost trust in a lot of people over the years. Because man, you've been at that level, man. This is not it's not college. It's a profession now. You know what I'm saying? It's a business, and so these kids don't want to trust people, and so on. And so we got to get that trust, and we have fun with them, and that's the thing. When it's time to work, it's time to work. Do we hold them accountable? Yeah, we hold them accountable, and we work their butts off, and most people, some of the things that we do at Garden City, most people are like, man, it's junior college, like what are you doing, and so on. But we want to give them options, and so on. And so I think I get more of a kick when a kid signs a scholarship and moves off to college. And like, just for instance, man, we had a big D tackle signed with the University of Arizona, Zach Sialepe. He's from Australia. And great kid. He's 6'7", 350 pounds, going to play nose tackle for him.
Damn.
You know what I'm saying? All the odds and statistics show, man, this young man was not supposed to go to college, man. You know what I'm saying? From when I first met him, when I got there, to his grades, just to his family, you know what I'm saying? As far as what happened, what he had to overcome, he's a great young man. But, statistics, if you put it all together, this young man was not supposed to go, especially to a P4 school. And so when he was able to sign a scholarship to go to the University of Arizona, man, that's better than any. I'll be honest with you, that's better than any winning season I've coached, in the past, right then and there. Because honestly, you don't see me going looking at, a board or a win or a trophy or wearing my rings or anything like that. I don't do all that. But what I'm saying, one thing that you will have for the rest of your life, and and I tell the kids all the time, is the relationships you have with your players, man. Whether it's through text message, Instagram, Twitter, or whatever, just to shoot them a text, man, saying that I'm proud of you. And when they respond back, hey coach, what's going on? I miss you. That right then and there says you did your job. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I look forward to be honest with you. When I get ready to get done with this, and I want to be known as just a player's coach, man, that wanted to help kids. If you throw some wins in there, hey, he won this championship or was coach of the year here, that's fine. But honestly, that's not what I'm about anymore. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes my staff looks at me like I'm crazy. I'm a little bit different, but it is what it is. I'm not chasing the dollar, and that's what a lot of the young coaches are chasing. They chase the dollar, they chase the emblem on the shirt and so on. That's not important to me no more. Family's more important. Getting these young men to have some success. We talk about it all the time, man, like especially, with the portal, man. And it's realistically, I tell our kids, I said, and I'll tell them when they get back, I want to be able to give you options. And they be like, what? I said, look, when you go on, because I'm going to get you to the next level, two things are going to happen. They're going to call you in the office and they're going to give you a raise and say, I want you to stay. Or they're going to tell you, hey, man, you'll never play here, hit the portal. Okay, well, I want you to be able to control the options and you have the cards in your hands. So I got to teach you, okay, what it takes, the different habits. So when you get to the next level, if you choose to stay, that's what you choose to do, then you can stay. If you choose to go, then you have other options.
It's a beautiful answer there, Yosh.
Thank
Well, obviously, I've admired you, man. I got to work with you at Boise State, Boise State for 2 years, and I was a graduate assistant. I just love your insight, love your wisdom, love your humility, and that's one thing that really spoke loudly To
Yeah.
me, you're a quiet guy until until you need to talk type of thing. But just your presence about you, man. You walked with the big stick, and that's what I love, man. Just your
Appreciate you, man.
presence about you. Spoke volumes. Your humility spoke volumes, and it's something that I admired and I watched and observed, and definitely learned a lot from you. All right, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop complimenting you here.
Man, nah,
Stop
yeah, man.
complimenting
You
you.
got my head's all swollen up right
Yeah,
now
no
and
doubt.
everything.
Who has been some of your greater influences throughout this profession, or someone outside the profession?
Man, I've had a couple of coaches that I've worked with and I played for that that's just been it made a huge impact on me. When I was playing ball, I had a coach, Mike Bardick. He was our defensive coordinator when I was playing at Rocky Mountain, and he kind of took me underneath his wing, and you know what I'm saying, like we were going through a coaching
Wait, this
change.
is Rocky Mountain, Montana.
In Montana, yeah,
Hey,
man, Montana, right then and there,
Cali
back in the
boy up in Montana. How was that?
Man, I enjoyed it. I like to fish, I like the outdoors. And so it was beautiful, great people. They treated me right. It was a great decision, was able to get a good education and a degree. So I enjoyed it, tremendously and so on. I keep in contact with their head coaches. They're great. He's a great guy right now. The head coaches in the past and everything. I'm a proud alumni and so on like that. So which is good. So, but we had a D coordinator. We're going through a coaching change. His name was, Mike Bardick, and shoot, man, it was just one of those things where he took me underneath his wing, and like we didn't know what direction of the program was going. He built those habits with me in the off season and so on. And I appreciated him so much for that because I was kind of like and kind of like I could have went either way, man. I could have went back home to California and, just, stop playing, working because I had a family, or I could have just continued playing, got my education. And so he helped me out tremendously with that. He showed me like a purpose and everything. And honestly, he didn't coach my position, man. I played offensive line. He was a D coordinator and so on. And it was just one of those things where, he just saw something in me and so on. And he didn't give up hope on me. And so I appreciate that. Unfortunately, he just passed away, a couple months back and so on. So his wife, he has two beautiful daughters, his son Bo, and so on like that. I wasn't able to go. We were smack dab in the middle of spring ball, so I wasn't able to go to the funeral. But I had a couple of teammates that went, and he just, he played a huge impact in just getting me to where I am today right now. And he was a father figure. He was a coach. He was a mentor, but he set me straight, man. Most people don't know that. Shoot, every day after weights, man, he would grab me, and we had this little track, and upstairs. And I was like, at first I was like, I'm trying to grab my stuff, I'm tired, and I'm just trying to head out, And he was like, okay, it's go time, Kiyoshi, let's go. And I'm just like, what? And so we would go up there, man, 5 days a week, man, and we would just run the track. And he started off with like, all right, I don't expect you to keep up with me, but I want you not to stop. I don't expect you to stop either. And so, eventually it started with just like 10 minutes, and then it's like 15, and then like 20. And eventually, we start working up. And after a while, he had me up there jogging around this track for like 30 minutes straight, 5 days a week, helping me drop weight, of course, just getting in shape. But, we would have a lot of great conversations too at the same time. He's one, that, anytime I went to the AFCA and he was there, we spent some time and, just talk. So he was a good one too. I respected my head high school coach, Jack Fogarty, and his staff, because I look back at it now and like he developed a work ethic in me, like, what I'm saying, that I have right now and so on, that I was able to continue on and play college football, go through, because I played junior college football too, go through junior college football at San Bernardino Valley and continue on and playing just because, my work ethic and everything. And that all started when in high school at Canyon Springs in Marina Valley. And, so I appreciate him for that. He's retired now. A lot of the coaches that have coached me, are still around and on social media, and that was just our life, man. Like, football was our life. Like, what did we do? We just did football all the time. And, and it's a little bit different now. And so, but it developed that work ethic that, a lot of programs didn't have, which was good. I look at guys like, Frank Miley. Frank, and everybody that I talk to who knows Frank, man,
Love
says
Frank.
the same thing about Frank. He's the best person in the world, and everybody loves Frank, and he's a genuine dude, and so on. But I think you look at Frank, and a lot of times about coaching is you learn, but sometimes you learn without saying things, man. You just observe the surroundings, and so you just kind of look and you just observe around different people. And Frank, and I'm not, put his business out there, but some of the decisions that he's made in his life to put his family first before football is like much respected by me, because a lot of people wouldn't do that. You know what I'm saying? I'm just be honest with you. You know what I'm saying? And some of the, the between his faith and just like some of the family, that are important things that are important to him, with him and his family, man. I look at that and I'm just like, man, this guy right here, good things are always going to happen to him just because of, a man like that. So, those are just a couple of, people that I really admire and so on. And then there's a lot more people too, man, just in being in the profession. Crazy thing about junior college is when everybody loves you if you have a player that they want. It's like high school, like the phone rings off the hook or whatever like that. But here's the crazy thing. But when you're when I went to Boise State, and they couldn't, I didn't have a player that they needed, or I was out of football, for a year. You know what I'm saying? I really admired like a lot of the guys that I was still able to shoot a text to or a call, and they called me back because they didn't have nothing. I didn't have nothing that they needed. You know what I'm saying? And like, and so which Coach Silverfield is like that over there at Memphis. You know what I'm saying? And I always admired him. He's an O-line guy. He's a great guy. But there's been times where, I didn't have nothing to give him, man. And he just picks up the phone, whether it's a text or a call. And he's a head coach at the University of Memphis, man. And so I'm busy, and I know he's probably 3 times as busy as me about things going on. But he always usually, gets back to me, and which is good. And that's the same thing with Coach Traylor over there at UTSA, man. Those guys right there. And, are they grinders? Yeah. Do they work hard? Yes. Are they good ball coaches? Yes. Are they good people? Yes. But man, realistically, by them just picking up that phone when I don't have nothing to give them, you know what I'm saying, or offer them, that just shows what type of human being they are. And so I respect them, and I've always appreciate them, and I'll help them out as long as I'm in the business, as long as I'm in the game.
Was there ever a point in your career, especially early on, where you almost took a different career path as opposed to coaching, or was it always just coaching?
No, it was like, man, like, get done with playing football. I got my degree. I wanted to go back and be a physical education teacher in high school, which a lot of times you got to coach and everything. So, but I had no problem doing that. So I was coaching, and then I was applying to go get my master's, and I wanted to get my master's in counseling because I wanted to help. I
Or you
wanted,
would have been perfect for that. I mean,
yeah,
you're doing that right now. You're
yeah,
doing that right
I'm
now.
doing it right then and there. So I'm signed up. I'm ready to log in. Boom, boom. I'm ready to go. Masters and PPS, and then at the last minute, man, somebody from school was like, man, you would be good in getting a master in kinesiology, and with a couple of other buddies of mine and so on. They said, you go coach junior college, and I have a good friend, Dave Ports, and longtime junior college coach in California, and he actually coached me when I was in junior college, and he was like, man, you need to get it in kinesiology, man. Come coach junior college, teach. You can't teach without having a master's, and then so I had him in one ear. I had the lady at the school in another ear. And I'm just like, at the last minute, last day, I flipped my degree, and or flipped my master's to kinesiology. And I kind of went from there. And so instead of taking that counseling route, I stayed in the coaching profession. And so I just kind of went from there.
That's awesome. If there was a advice that you could give to your younger self, what would that be?
Man, I always tell myself, like, if you really, and it's kind of crazy, you got to look out more for yourself. You got to be selfish in this profession. You know what I'm saying? I was a lot of times, I'm a loyal person. So I'm loyal to the coaches that I work for and everything like that. But if you want to make it in this profession, you got to be loyal to yourself and everything. And sometimes, it was times, I should have probably just said, hey, man, I'm going to be loyal to myself and my family, and I'm going to go try this out at a younger age and so on. But I didn't do that and so on. And the years pass up. And so I tell a lot of the younger coaches this all the time. I say, if you really want to do it in this profession and be at the level that everybody wants to be at, or, be in that position or have that title, you got to, kind of be selfish about it, and you got to, look out for yourself. And it's kind of bad to say it. I don't like really saying it. That's why I was kind of hesitant to say it, but it's the truth, man. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you got to leave, different jobs to, to progress your career and so on like that. But everything, I believe also everything happens for a reason. And I believe, the man above kept me, in junior college for a reason. And I'm extremely grateful and happy. And, I'm glad he gifted me with the talent, to be in junior college. So I'm happy with it.
Greatest challenge in coaching?
Man, I think the greatest challenge in coaching is realistically to understand with these kids that there's only so many kids that are going to make, the $1 million right now. I'm talking about currently, I'm not talking about in the past and so on. And to do that, they have to realize they have to accept criticism, be honest. But honestly, just getting them all to understand how hard it is to even get to that level, man. There's a small percent, you know what I'm saying? And like I tell our guys all the time, you're not only getting going against recruits from our conference, the whole NJCAA of junior college, but also California, high school, and the transfer portal. So that means you got to outwork everybody else in the country. And when you look at it like that, it's like, and you think about that, it's like, dang, it's almost dang near impossible, but it's not impossible. You know what I'm saying? You just got to have a work ethic and some, of course, God given talent a little bit, at the same time. But that's what, every kid that we get, if I sit in a and next week, I'll have our kids all back in town, and they'll raise their hand. And everybody, every one of them wants to play at the FBS level. Every one of them. But is every one of them going to do what it takes that can play at the SBS level to get to the FBS level on and off the field and so on? And that's probably the hardest part right now, because when we look at social media or we just look on online and stuff, it just makes it look so easy. You know what I'm saying? But it actually is it's not that easy and so on. So that's probably the hardest part.
Yeah, you're kind of talking about, just such a slim percentage amount of players being valued at X amount of dollars.
Correct,
Kind of big picture now.
man.
Because you've been doing this for a lot of years, man. Are you kind of pro these guys getting paid money? I myself, I believe in free market. So if a coach can pick up and go anywhere he chooses to go and get compensated X amount of dollars, like I do feel that the player is entitled to that. What's your take on that?
Man, I think the players should be compensated
Yep.
because realistically, if you look at it, it is a business. People in schools and different TV companies are making a ton of money off these games and everything. And the kids, they deserve something, and it's hard because, you see kids all the time and over the years that sign an FBS scholarship and they're just struggling, still struggling. They'll call me up and they just, to borrow money or, what I'm saying, they'll struggle. And so realistically, I do, I'm all for the kids making money. But I honestly think too, we have to look at the whole thing as far as, how the kids budget their money too at the same time, because they are getting paid a lot of money. And like I tell our kids when they leave and I have a talk with them before they go, I say, hey, look, man, the cars and the necklaces and all that stuff is good, that materialistic stuff, but is that going to be a good value, 10 years down the line, man? Here's a crazy story, man. I had a kid, an old tackle years back, man, that I coached probably in '07, '08, I believe, and at COD, he went to University of Arizona. And this is before, realistically, everything kicked off, of course. And like, while he was at the University of Arizona, man, he was smart enough with his money that he bought him a house. And like, now the house, he said was in a, neighborhood, that, a lot of people, wanted to live in, if you want to call it. but he still was able at the age of 20, 19, and bought him a house. He was smart enough to do that. And I tell all our players, like, man, you're going to get paid all this money. And rather than trick it on off, there's going to become a time where you're not going to be able to play football again. There's a small percentage. And I don't tell them, like, hey, man, you're not going to the NFL, because you never know, what I'm saying? You just don't know no more, but there's a small percentage that will go on and play. And then there's a large, very large percentage that's not going to go on and play. And what are you going to have in your pocket? You're going to have a family. Well, that piece of property that you buy, or your investment that you're putting your money into, that can help you long term with your family. That necklace right there, your son, your daughter, your wife is not going to probably wear that. You know what I'm saying? And so we have to do something. And I think I was reading something about it was a coach at Syracuse, man, and he was telling his kids they have to go through different classes just about, how to budget their money and so on. They have to save like 40% of the money and stuff like that. That's, I respect that, because, man, like a lot of people, even when it comes to coaching, man, when it's over, big dog, it's over. And so what are you going to have to show for it in life? And I think we're putting a lot of the money over a lot of different things. Hey, man, there should be some priorities, like mandated, like finish your degree, make sure you get that degree, what I'm saying, wherever you go, make sure you get that degree finished. So you have to pass a certain amount of classes to get the check or something. I don't know, but we just got to make sure that when these kids are all done, they're set up and everything.
Yeah, no, I think what you're talking about with Coach Brown at Syracuse, and kind of what you alluded to at the end, just having some guardrails in place,
Yeah.
or checkpoints, or like you said, it's a business now. So if there is, and I've been removed from it a little bit, so I don't know exactly where it's going, but like when you talk about money, like if there's an agreement or if there's a contract, if you don't withhold or uphold these standards as far as what you're doing in the classroom, or you skipping classes, so on and so forth, that you don't get your full guaranteed amount, or what you were told. So,
Yes, sir.
but just to kind of, and I don't want to go off on a tangent here down this route, but I think one of the arguments is like, these kids are 18 to 22, 18 to 23 years old. Kind of like you alluded to, like, okay, how are they managing their money? They're not making good decisions. But at the same time, like, there's players in the NFL, there's players in the
Yep.
NBA who, after they retire, they're going broke. You know what I mean? So I mean, this is not just a concentrated issue from 18 to 22 to 18 to
You're
23
right.
years. Like, I think fiscal responsibility is an issue, for anyone, and it can happen to anyone.
Yeah, no doubt. And and I know that when we were at Boise, they were talking about bringing people in and just kind of going through and just getting in front of the team and just talking to people, talking to the kids about this, which and it's smart. It really hasn't hit our level as much, but when our kids leave our level, it's right. It's they go from breadcrumbs to basically, what I'm saying, just having thousands of dollars and so on.
And I mean, I'm sure it's hard, especially when you have that amount of money, and it just came so quickly. It's like,
Yeah,
how do you think long term with that? I mean, that's tough.
no doubt.
I want to transition, talking a little bit about team dynamics, but before we get into that, my daughter Anela had a question for you. And then, what was your favorite sport growing up?
Man, my favorite sport has always kind of been football. I played soccer, believe it or not. I played, growing up, I played baseball, and, football. I did the bowling league thing for a little bit. And,
Did you
you know,
really? What would you shoot for bowling?
yeah, man, I was horrible. It was when we were younger. My mom just wanted us, to kind of get out, of the house a little bit. So it was like a weekend bowling league and everything. But football has always been growing up playing flag football, because I was always too heavy to play tackle football until I got to high school, and so I was just playing flag football, and so I enjoyed that a lot. And and then it just kind of ventured into high school, and then it's led to college and everything. So which was good.
Yeah. I want to talk about that. You talk about flag football, because my wife asked me yesterday, and we
Uh,
had a little bit of debate going back and forth. She's like, if Kainoa, who's our son, he's about a year and a half now. I don't think he
yeah.
got, I don't, yeah, he was born when I got up here to Oregon State. She
Uh,
asked me, how do you feel about, like, when can Kainoa play football? And I was
yeah.
like, and I brought up, like, to me, in my opinion, like, unless I question that he can take a hit or receive a hit and that he's not tough, like, I would hold them off to playing tackle football until high school or at least eighth grade year, and
Yeah,
have them play flag. Want
yeah,
to get the OG's thoughts on that. What's your personal opinion on that?
man.
And then I'm gonna go take it to my wife. So I'm hoping you side with me right now.
I've known a lot of people that decide that right then. Me personally, I didn't want my son playing until high school. You know what I'm saying? And just because of that, but I've had friends and so on that there's kids that played, you know, little league and taking that hit like you're saying, and it's like I'm done and never played again and everything. And you want to make sure that they're physically ready, not just physically but mentally at the same time. Part of me sees kind of what the lower level kids were going through and how it prepared because man, my son, he played, I think when he started at 7. I lost the battle with my wife. My son wanted to play, he wanted to play, and I said, all right, I'm gone a lot, so she would do all the stuff. She would take him to practice, sit there with them, through all the conditioning and everything. And then every once in a while, but I would just hear about what they have to go through, and I think that kind of helped him overall become a better, like, just a grinder, like, gave him a work ethic and stuff. And so, I kind of go back and forth with it too at the same time. More and more, I see more and more kids now playing flag. Flag is becoming more popular, especially out here on the West Coast. Shoot, my little 2.5-year-old granddaughter wants to play football. She talks about it all the time. So I think my daughter's going to put her in a little flag. They got a flag football league for 2.5 and 3-year-olds. And so
What?
yeah, yeah. Crazy. They got a little flag football league for 2.5 and 3-year-olds. So
That's pretty
I
cool.
think, yeah, I think, we're going to put her in that. But, honestly, as I look back at it, I probably maybe wouldn't have started them at 7 or 8, but I probably would have waited to maybe use about, 12 if I'm not going to do the high school thing, just so he can understand what he's going to go through. Every program is different, but and I know, man, football is challenging and it's not for everybody. And that's why the turnover rate is so high because these kids get out there and they just kind of get shocked by kind of what's going on or the demand, physicality, and everything about what's going on. So it's like it's one of those things, man. I guess every family is different, but I hope it works out, man. That's one of those political answers right there.
It's a good editorial answer.
Yeah,
Kind of transfer it into team dynamics, construction of a team. What does team mean to you?
man. I think team is a huge thing, but it kind of goes back to it's like we'll meet in about a week, and to me, I'll tell the players, look on the left of you, the whole classroom or will be filled up, and I say look on the right of you and so on like that. And I said, some of these guys in this room won't be here in 30 days, but the guys that are going to be here in 30 days, when you look to the left and you look to the right, what I'm saying, I want you to be able to stay in contact with these dudes and for the next 30 or 40 years, you know what I'm saying? And honestly, no matter, you're going to have memories, good and bad, and so on. Some are going to be more successful than others, and so on. But what it comes down to is the relationships that you build here at Garden City and junior college. In 30 years, I want you to be able to pick up the phone and call this guy, and I want him to be able to pick up the phone, and I want you guys to be able to talk, and connect and do whatever. And to me, that's my definition of team right then and there. And if they're willing and understand and able to take that in and accept that, that means you're going to be able to grow and establish a culture of family. You're going to be able to establish, and once you have established that culture of family, then it's time to work. It's time to grind. But they have to understand the importance of the next guy that's sitting next to them. And they have to also understand the importance of every decision that you make could affect that person that's sitting next to you. Whether it's you going to Walmart and stealing a piece of candy, whether you know what I'm saying, you doing something you're not supposed to do in class, you missing a tackle, you missing a block, you're not finishing your sprint, you're not taking the workout serious. Everything that you do reflects the guy that's next to you in this room right now. And so he's either going to know that you're full of crap and not pick up the phone, or he's going to know that you grinded like he grinded, and he's definitely going to pick that phone up, and realistically, and you guys are going to have a relationship that's going to last a lifetime.
That's a great answer, Coach. That's a great answer. You were talking about, when they report and when they check in and look to your left, look to your right. And we talked a little bit about before we hopped on. It's, you have set 85 roster, so you bring in X amount of guys and you have to cut it down just a little bit. Some people cut themselves. But what is that? What does that conversation look like for you? Player does everything right. Doesn't miss workouts, shows up, does what he's asked, but he just can't play at this level. What does that conversation look like? If you're about to cut me, the Kyoshi Harris cut.
The thing about it, so the kid's not going to make the roster, and and he's a great kid. He does everything right. What I'm saying? It's just he was weaned out by what I'm saying, some depth of talent at that particular position. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you to stay on. Okay. Now, depending on what level you, what grade, or excuse me, what year you are, not grade, what year you are. So if you're an incoming freshman and you're just coming straight out of high school, I'm going to tell you, hey, man, let me gray shirt you. Let me red shirt you. Stay. Let's develop you. You'll have a big time off season in the spring. You were almost there. You know what I'm saying? And you'll be hopefully the guy next year. You're still going to have to compete. You know what I'm saying? You already know it's at the college level. It's not high school no more, but you understand. But let's keep you in the program. Get you some film through practice. Okay. Get you bigger, faster, stronger, and so on. You know what I'm saying? If I don't want to burn your red shirt year, okay, let's try to gray shirt you. Okay, it gets into academics, getting into the finances on that part. Now, if he's an older guy that maybe transferred in and he's not going to make the roster, I give him two options. So I say, look, you can leave and, you can try and go somewhere else to get on the field, because I know everybody wants to get a scholarship, and to get a scholarship, you have to have film. But you can also understand you can stay here and you come to practice every day, and the notoriety of the Juco, notoriety of Coach Harris and the staff, and you being able to play and compete every day against the best, guess what? You can probably earn yourself. We have kids that earn scholarships that don't make the roster and so on, believe it or not, and everything. Just because they're at Garden City, they're practicing every day, they're getting the film and so on. And I said, it's better for you to stay with us and participate and get at least some practice film, okay, rather than, what I'm saying, you not be here or go home and not do anything. Some kids will try to transfer, and, it's hard right now. It's hard. It's plain and simple. And so realistically, that's why this month of July is a huge evaluation period for us. And, we got to be honest with our guys, and we got to be honest from the jump with them. And I tell them from Jump Street, man, realistically, half you guys are not going to make the roster, and they look at me with big eyes and so on. And I explain, the reasons why they can't make the roster and so on. But then if we're, if we're recruiting them, we see something in them. Okay. And if we bring them in to Garden City, okay, we want to make the commitment to try to help them to get to the next level. It's just some kids are not patient enough for that, and they decide, to leave, move on. Normally, those kids that are not patient enough, majority of the time it doesn't work out for them, and they end up not playing at all, totally. You know what I'm saying? And I end up getting calls back a year later or 6 months later and so on like that. And it's a hard conversation to have, and because you get this. Everybody's coming out of high school was the guy they want to come in and play, and it can't happen like that. And I think I have a lot of high school friends that are coaches, and I have a lot of high school coaches that are buddies too at the same time, and it's just like preparing them mentally for that, because I don't think it's the physical part that gets with the kids. It's more of the mental that gets them than anything. That they have to understand. All right, you possibly could not be that guy. So what are you gonna do? You got to continue to work.
How do you go about creating healthy competition at the JUCO level? And I know, you know, just in football in general, right? You want a lot of edge, you want a lot of back and forth between the offense and defense. But how do you go about keeping everyone focused, but at the same time, kind of towing that line as far as edge?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it starts with the recruiting. Okay, you got to be smart about your roster. You know what I'm saying? And it comes to scouting your roster to kind of see kind of your needs and everything. I think a lot of times guys, they kind of get comfortable, as far as when I say guys, coaches, as far as just like they don't want to over recruit their roster and everything, which nowadays, it seems like, at our level, it's easily to over recruit your roster and so on. But So when you're recruiting, there are certain positions that basically you got to bring in a certain amount of guys in, and it has to be a high level of competition, because if you lose a guy, okay, the downfall or the fallout, or what I'm saying, the level of competition of play between those two guys, it can't be that huge, and so on. And so I think you really, they have to trust the coach and they have to trust the head guy. And we tell them all the time, if you're good enough, you're going to play. You know what I'm saying? If you have three quarterbacks that are equally talented and so on, and it's junior college, they all need things. We're gonna figure out how to play all three of you guys, believe it or not. You know what I'm saying? But if only two of you guys are good and the other kid is, a little bit behind, but just because of, where he's from, or, vice versa, whatever, he's not going to play. We have to make it competitive, because the competition, the cream rises to the top, and, like any practices or any games and so on, you want the swag. We want our corners to have that swag, because they're out there on that island playing man. We want our, our wide receivers to be able to, to compete against those corners and go up and get them balls, and, and so on. And we want to have fun in practice. And so I think as coaches, we stage practice in a way where we bring out the competition, and we're able to do it in a way that way we don't have to, we can eliminate some of the talking and so on like that. And so we put it more in a game situation, a game environment. And so that way you can compete, and still build your confidence and have confidence, but in a way that's not going to hurt us in the game. You know what I'm saying? And so, there's kids that get out there and, because, they're looking at different people at the higher levels. And there's some kids that are just going to talk no matter what. They're 4.0 kids in the classroom. They're there, everything on time. They don't miss anything. But when they get on the field, they're going to run their mouth. You know what I'm saying? That's just who they are, and so on. And, I don't want to change that, because realistically, they're doing everything right. But I do have to coach them in a way to understand that, hey, man, you could target us in a way that we might not want to be targeted, going in the game. And so there's kind of a couple of different scenarios that we kind of bring up in practice. And, we make it part of our practice plan that we allow good competition, you know what I'm saying? And we want excitement, and, we want our coaches to compete. And everything I think we breed in our program is about competition. Hey, man, you know what I'm saying? Are you going to take better notes than this guy right here in class? You know what I'm saying? Is he going to get 2 more reps in the weight room than this guy right here? You know what I'm saying? It's like, is he going to lose or gain weight faster in a week than you? It's like everything's about competition. So I think when you're instructing and you're coaching that, you just can't pull it out when you get to the field, because the kid is talking a lot. He also has to understand, hey, man, that talking could cost you a scholarship too at the same time. You know what I'm saying? Coach, whatever can be on the sideline, and that cannot be his thing at the same. So we kind of control in a way, but we still have fun.
Yeah. Do you notice a difference in the sense of urgency at the JUCO level, because they have 2 to 3 years as opposed to being at a 4 to 5 year institution?
Man, honestly, I did notice more of a sense of urgency in saying, to totally honest with you, right then and there. Kids expect to come to junior college, and they expect to, go back Division 1 or go to Division 1 and so on like that. I think the biggest thing is just what I see a lot of times, it's a maturity level, you know what I'm saying? And, the same issues that we had at Boise, I have at Garden City, or we had at Independence, or vice versa, you know what I'm saying? They probably have them at Alabama, Clemson, USC. They're going to have this, everybody's going to have the same problems and so on like that. It's just, I think the kids have adapted a little bit faster because they've been there a little bit longer. Because you're looking at kids that are there 3, 4, 5 years, you know what I'm saying, at that 4-year level, where this is like you're talking before, when I get them in, they're there with me the first semester, and you have, 100 plus guys. They're there, you know what I'm saying, trying to find their spot, trying to find their place, and, trying to buy into the culture or not buy into the culture. And so, it's just a shorter period of time, whereas you want the urgency for them to buy in. It just takes a longer time than you did when at Boise.
How do you go about establishing a sense of shared leadership within the team?
You know,
Is the captain process, is that democratic? Is that something the coaches are choosing?
it's, realistically, it's kind of come straight from us. I've kind of seen it both ways over the years with, working with different coaches and even myself. I've had a leadership team. We've had captains and, sometimes, and, that becomes very political because it comes into, just, who's liked more and who's not liked and everything like that. So I think honestly, it just starts from me and it kind of trickles through my coaches and it kind of goes through my coaches into the players. And so we have our set captains for our games that our kids, and those are kids that just are just straight grinders that work hard, that do things right, saying, and most of the time, if that happens, you're probably a pretty good player on the team for the most part. You know what I'm saying? If you're buying into everything else, but you know, it's just, I think, because of the short stay, it's hard with the leadership panel. It's hard with the, what I'm saying, maybe a captain panel. Now, don't get me wrong, they police themselves and we build a culture, and, what I'm saying, that they will police themselves and so on like that and hold each other accountable for their actions. But, they're young men at the same time. And like, I think we take some of the pressure. That's one less thing that we have them, worry about and so on, that we could worry about, and let them just focus on their academics and,
Let's just say you guys go out there against a rival, freaking great game, tied in the fourth quarter, take the lead, opposing team comes down, scores with 30 seconds left, 2 point conversion, up by one, you guys end up losing the game. What's that conversation like in the locker room after the game?
you know, first thing, I've always take all the responsibility because I'm the head guy. You know what I'm saying? I'm older. I've been doing this a longer time. You know what I'm saying? My mental is different than they are. You know what I'm saying? They're 19, 20, sometimes 21, but they're still young. You know what I'm saying? I think you tell them, that close to a game, you played a heck of a game, and, it, it's gonna fall short sometimes, and we have talks about this all the time. You know what I'm saying? It's basically, it's sad to say, but you don't see too many teams that just go undefeated throughout the year. There's always going to be that one game and so on, and it's better of a learning experience. And we want them to be hurt, okay, and we tell them that it should hurt, because if it doesn't hurt, what I'm saying, that doesn't mean you're not part of it. That you're not a person that we want on this team if it doesn't hurt, and so on. But I think we learn from it. We take the night, we let it sit on our head a little bit, okay, and then we come back and we show them the film. We get a good little workout on Sunday, and we run around a little bit, and and we put it behind us. And there's difference. You know what I'm saying? You lose by one, and you're in a dogfight the whole game, and you didn't quit. That's a whole different conversation compared if you lose by 40, and what I'm saying, and guys turn some stuff down. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel you on that one. What does that conversation look like if you go out there and
Man,
get your ass whooped?
that conversation is not too good right then and there.
At the end of the season, going into the off season, what does your self scout process look like as a coach? Are you thinking big picture, kind of operations, recruiting, and X's and O's? What is kind of
Man,
the outline of that?
the X's and O's is always put, not the back burner, but realistically, what I'm saying, you clean things up, get ready to go into the off season, okay? And then, but honestly, you already kind of started probably diving into recruiting, okay? And recruiting just kind of overtakes a lot and takes charge. And, it's probably the main priority, and then, but, you got to clean up your loose ends, you got to have your exit meetings with your players. You got to have your exit meeting with your coaches. And you got, of course, your primary focus, I should say, before even recruiting, is taking care of your kids that are on campus right now. And realistically, that means helping them find a place. So you're juggling the incoming, the scouting, what you're losing, okay, with also helping them, trying to get out. And a lot of people think that, nowadays they just going to come to you. Like before, it was a lot easier, man. They'll just come to you. Well, it's not as easy as most people think nowadays because of the portal and so on. Before I was at Independence, man, we would have 20 FBS coaches at our practice, all the time, like just tons. But it's not like that anymore. So we do a really good job, especially Coach Langren, as getting our kids marketed, getting our kids in front of different coaches in the recruiting departments and stuff.
How many guys did you guys place this past year? Not necessarily at the FBS level, just all across.
Probably, sorry about that.
Got a little hairball over there.
Yeah, shoot, probably close to probably 40 plus.
Yeah.
Yeah, 40 plus.
That's
I'm
it.
looking at I'm looking for the graphic right now.
You
But
tweeted something just the other day. I gotta go find this.
so I counted 36 on the graphic when there's a couple still that we had to put on the graphic. I don't know where we're going to put at them. So it'll be close to 40. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And that's everywhere from FBS, FCS, D2, D3.
Yeah. Really, most of our kids, 9 out of 10 go D1, and so it's FCS or FBS. We have a high number of kids go FBS.
You ain't got no Linfield guys in there?
And I wish. When it comes, at the minimum, the kids will go D2, And so we don't have too many kids going NAI, I think, or D3. So.
I wanted to ask you about, is there anything like that you do that you wish you did when you first started? Like any sessions during practice, whether that's more good on good, whether that's 9-on-7 run, or it's like something that you're doing now that, damn, I wish I did this right when I started coaching.
I think, I just think I wanted to look at more. We didn't have a teaching background. I have a teaching background. And so being that I have a teaching background, I think just looking at the progression, I'm huge on progression of teaching and a progression of coaching. Okay, how we implement things as far as on the offensive, defense, and special teams. Just the progression of teaching of the install, and so on. That's something that when I was younger, as a younger coach, I probably didn't do. And that's overall the whole team right then and there. You know what I'm saying? We want to basically, I guess you can call it somewhat of a perfectionist, but I'm a huge on teaching, and we want to make sure that all the I's and T's are crossed as far as when we go in this install. So, but just for instance, we won't go out there and just do like a team period. It'll start individually, maybe with the offense, which is a walkthrough. And then we'll come on out and then we'll progressively do it with just the offensive line. And then maybe we'll incorporate a half line run period, okay, in that. And then realistically, maybe from the half line run period, we would do a full line against a bags, you know what I'm saying, before the competition or the contact even starts and so on like that. Because a lot of times, once you throw the contact in there or the physicality in there, a lot of times the technical or the technique kind of goes out the window and everything right real fast. So we're incorporating a lot of different drills in practice before we get to the meat and potatoes.
Gotcha. You talked about culture a little bit throughout the conversation. Is there any acronyms, quotes, or values that you live by that you share with the team?
We got our 4 quarters, we throw up the fours, our 4 quarter mindset. And so we want our kids to win every day, and, basically we want them, everybody thinks, okay, we've been brought up so long in this game of football that we're going to win, on the field. We want to win on the field on Saturday, don't get me wrong, but we believe that it don't just start on Saturday, it starts in practice. So we're going to focus more on practice than we are on the game. So we're going to win every day in practice, on the field in practice, but we're also going to win in the weight room. We believe the weight room kind of scopes our culture of just hard work, kind of blue collar like Boise State, and we're just going to outwork people. We have a different style, okay? We love the sweat, we love the grind, okay? We love to hear the weights bang, and then we're going to win in the classroom, okay? Because it has to kind of go hand in hand and everything. So a lot of people think, it's just going to happen that easy, with the portal opening up and now it's going to one time a year. You have to have your academics on point. There's a lot of schools we send out transcripts and the kids don't never hear back from them because the academics might not be on point. And then there's some kids we send out transcripts and it's automatically, hey, offer city because they know the kid is going to graduate on time. You know what I'm saying? And then we want to win in the community. And that probably is the biggest thing right then and there. It's just because at any given time, whatever you do can reflect the team, reflect the coaches and their families, and it can be taken from us and so on. So we want to win in those 4 areas. And it's not winning in 3 out of the 4. You got to win out 4 out of the 4. And that's on a daily basis. And so here's the thing about it. You have a kid that goes to weights every day. He has 4.0 in the classroom. He's a good kid in the community. You know what I'm saying? He's a perfect kid, but he don't like to practice. You know what I'm saying? It's hot. He don't like to practice. Okay, nah, man, you're not that guy for us, big dog. Because guess what? You ain't winning in all four of the quarters that of our mindset. You know,
Yeah.
I want a kid that's going to win in everything. And then you have a lot of times you have the kids that, hey man, you seen them, love to practice, love to lift weights, love to go to meetings, don't do anything wrong, but just school is not for them. You know what I'm saying? And they don't want nothing to do with school. And so, nope, you're not the one for us. And so we have to instill. That's our culture. That's our mindset right there.
If I'm if I just was at the, let's just say, University of Utah
Uh huh.
play, I was a big recruit coming out of high school. Did a year at the University of Utah. Thought I wasn't given a fair shot. What is your recruiting pitch to me versus the rest of the other schools that are looking?
Man, everybody's gonna probably tell them the same thing if they have that position of need. You know what I'm saying? But I think the biggest thing for us is how we're gonna open up your recruitment. You know what I'm saying? My ties all over the country. You know, just from coaching California junior college for so long. You know, being in the Mountain West. You know, just understanding that, but then also being in Kansas, and you know, we're gonna open it up nationwide. And you know, and some other schools might do that too as well. But I tell them, I say, you're not going to ever have a kid or a coach, excuse me, you're not going to ever have a coach that's going to stand on the table and do a backflip for you to try to help you out to get you to a school. Because, you know, a lot of times, most coaches, they wait for schools to come to them. Well, we're not going to do that. We're going to go out, and it takes work to do that. We're going to go out and we're going to get the schools, you know, interested in you and by getting you in front of the schools.
Yeah. Coach, is there any final words of wisdom that you want to touch on as far as coaching, teaching, leadership that you'd like to share with for the good of the community?
We always say we're judged off, you know, either you play 10 games, 11 games, or 12 games a season, whatever you play, you know, that's what you're judged off as a coach. And realistically, I do agree with that because you know, you're paid in the profession to win. But, you know, as coaches, we're also judged off how we're developing these young men at the same time, you know, life after when they get done playing football. And so that's something that we have to remember when we get ready. And sometimes that's something I have to remind myself. You know, I'm human too at the same time that I got to remind myself at the same, like when I get ready to go in this meeting, it's all about establishing relationships with these kids in a way they have to understand that, but hey, you're going to buy into our culture, but basically this culture is going to help you in the long run. And that's what we have as coaches have to remember. You know, sometimes we have to put that in front of, you know, saying the wins. And it's hard. I know that. But guess what? You get that, the wins will come.
Well, shoot, Coach, man, I appreciate your time. Appreciate you hopping on with me and, you know, imparting some wisdom on me and, you know, the rest of the people that listen.
I appreciate you having me, man. Big dog. Hey, it's been a fun time and thank you.
All right, Coach. Have a good day.
All right, brother.
Tell the fam I said hi, all right?
Same thing. Same thing. I got to go
All
get me
right.
some coffee now.
All right, Coach. I see you.